Do you sleep?
I don't sleep much. So we started a new fund last week. According to my lawyers, I'm not supposed to talk about any of the material aspects of that fund on the investor side, but I can talk about sort of what we're doing on kind of the investing side. And it's really just continuing a lot of the same philosophy I've had in doing angel investing and what I was doing last year for Founders Fund. So I ran 2 programs for Founders Fund last year. One was a small $2 million seed portfolio. We did about 20 investments out of that, so a large number of small deals. And I also ran the Facebook Fund incubator program last year, FB Fund, and kind of like a Y Combinator Techstars structure for Facebook. We did about 22 companies out of that, and also 2 nonprofits. So last year was a very, fast-paced, did about 40 or 50 deals on a relatively small budget, a little under $3 million. And what I kind of found out from that is a lot of things fail, but if you sort of do a lot of small investments, a few things actually work. So I've been trying to take that philosophy and kind of do more of that. So pretty ridiculous pace, I guess, compared to most other investors, but really get to work on the product and the marketing side, which is the kind of stuff that I enjoy. So I had done 13 angel investments before I joined Founders Fund to run their program. I did about 13 after I left, but most of those will roll into the fund. I don't know, we plan to do a lot of investments, but again, really focusing more on incubation and seed, and we'll probably do an incubator program sometime in the fall. My philosophy on angel investing, even though we're sort of operating as a fund size, the structure of investments is similar. It's one part, sort of what Aiden Senkat and Jeff Clavier and other folks in that category do, which is mostly seed investment deals. Maybe one part sort of Techstars and Y Combinator, where we're doing a little bit earlier stage stuff that's not quite as far along. And then, having some follow-on capacity to be able to do, investments into the A and B rounds, although we're not likely to lead on those types of rounds. But I think the more significant point is trying to be differentiated around design and distribution and metrics. So, I've been doing a lot of talks on startup metrics for pirates for the last 2 or 3 years, and sort of a, pretty basic set of observations around how conversion matters for user experience and for distribution. But most engineering founders don't pay as much attention to UX considerations, tend to overbuild a little bit on the features side, and many times they don't think about distribution channels, particularly these days where there's many different sort of online distribution opportunities via search, social, and mobile. And so really trying to bring those things to bear to the, the typical technology-oriented founder. I'm a pretty different animal than most other investors out there, even most other seed investors. I guess because I used to be a programmer, I sort of feel very comfortable hanging out with folks in the geek and tech segment. I run a lot of user groups and events, so I run a monthly startup series called Startup to Startup, and another one here in the city called Finance for Founders. I do a travel-based sort of program called Geeks on a Plane. Typically, I run about one decent-sized conference a quarter. We did one on online marketing called Smash Summit. We're doing one coming up called Warm Gun that's on design for engineers. So I get out and about. I spend a lot of time wasting time on Twitter and Facebook, and every once in a while I write a rather incendiary blog post that that most people think is childish and infantile, but I enjoy. I think, people who are developing for a problem space that's very straightforward. So as much as I'm in technology, I really prefer non-technology focused investments that are around problems for everyday people. So family and education or business productivity, something that's not, the latest newsreader It's more like, hey, I want to find a great nanny for my kids. How could I do that? Or hey, I want to, be more effective in, communicating with my customers at work or something like that. I think, businesses that are going after that stuff, startups that are going after that stuff, it feels like it's much easier to focus on the customer. And then you can apply technology to solving those problems, but the product itself isn't necessarily a technical product. It's a product for everybody. I like stuff where the revenue model is really straightforward, so usually direct transactional, either physical goods or digital goods, subscription billing or lead gen. I like to stay close to sort of the transaction and not too complex on that side. And I like a team that sort of shows a interest in sort of being able to iterate quickly, so not very long on the product cycle development. I don't know, it's not, I think I'd rather take the contrarian point of view, which is everybody was like, running around like the sky was falling, a year and a half ago when the financial crisis hit. And, yeah, there's a lot of disruption in the financial services industry and much of the economy, and there was a big impact on the venture capital side. But the thing is, like, the macroeconomic picture for consumer internet services is like the macroeconomic picture for the world. People aren't going to stop buying shit. There's definitely growth in online services. The cost structure is going down. Cost of producing technology is going down. So I think all the factors are headed in the right direction for people doing more online consumer services. And I guess the only fear or concern is that the larger platform companies remain nimble enough to go after big segments. So, if you were bullish about location-based services and you wanted to do a startup in that category, you might be worried that Google or Facebook, even though they're large companies, could go after those spaces. So, but I think there's more playing field and opportunity because of the work that Google and Facebook and other people are doing, not less. So I don't know, short of a asteroid hitting the Earth or other things that are cause people major concerns outside of just tech, I'm not too worried about the future for the consumer web. Groupon and Groupon clones are overhyped. I think Groupon's great, but I think there's a lot of people who are going after flash-based marketing, and that's it's a feature that many people will adopt. It's a great idea, but there's not necessarily a lot that's defensible around that. Same thing with location-based services and check-in. I think Dennis is a smart guy, and Josh is a smart guy. Foursquare and Gowalla have some really good opportunities ahead of them, and a few other companies as well. But check-in will become somewhat of a commodity. I think the financial incentives behind check-ins are possibly more important. This is kind of a strange thing. I think expressing strong opinions is the verbal form of A/B testing. Like, you don't know what you think until you say it and hear it, and a lot of times you may change your opinion, but until you actually state it, you don't really know what opinion you have a lot of times. So I think writing for me and speaking sometimes is a way for me to actually test my own opinions about things and kind of listen and say, am I full of shit, or does that actually sort of hold water? But I do think, a lot of things I talk about in metrics are about A/B testing, and that's really helpful for finding local maximum. It's not so helpful for finding non-local. Like I would say if you're not on the right hill, or the market you're going after isn't, as large or maybe as, passionate about your product, you may still need to kind of recraft that message. And doing incremental changes in A/B testing may not be very useful for that. So there's still a very creative, non-intuitive leap part of the process of being an entrepreneur that you have to understand the problem and understand the customer, hopefully be the customer to kind of have a feel for that. Once you sort of have a take on that, then you're putting this solution to page and trying to bring it to life and trying to optimize it. And then I think you have to be sort of analytically rigorous about how well you're doing with that guess and try and continue to work on that. I think sometimes entrepreneurs can be too passionate and get caught up in their own subjective sense of what is the right thing. And maybe if you're Steve Jobs, that works. But I think for most people, it can occasionally be off-center if you're only relying on your own intuition and not looking at market feedback. And the great thing about doing consumer internet businesses is you can test reactions in pretty close to real time and get feedback on what you're doing. So, if something you're doing isn't working or sucks, people will tell you right away as long as you're listening and as long as you're measuring. So it's sort of an interesting combination of this, creative, left brain kind of world, and I can't remember what's left and right, but there's a creative process that takes you to hop to these, new instantiations of the problem space and, customer solution, and then being more technology focused a little bit, but in an iterative sense, and being able to iterate quickly to find kind of the local maximum for that. But I do think it's important for entrepreneurs to be passionate, but I think it's also important for them to listen to customers.